There are truths that only silence can reveal. There are wounds so old, they no longer bleed, but echo. And somewhere beneath the surface of your daily distractions, your curated identity, your tireless striving, there is something inside you asking to be remembered. This is not a video about motivation. This is not a lesson in success. This is a descent into the ancient depths of your psyche, where your forgotten self still waits. In the next few moments, you will not be given steps. You will be given symbols. You will not be told what to believe. You will be invited to feel what you've avoided. What you are about to hear is not advice. It is a mirror. And if you have the courage to look, you may finally remember who you are. There comes a moment, not in the clamor of success or the safety of comfort, but in the silence between breaths where something ancient stirs inside you. A whisper. Not from the outside world, but from the depth of your own being. It is not loud, it is not urgent, but it is relentless. It murmurs in dreams you don't understand. It echoes in the quiet pain you can't explain. And when all the masks fall away, when you are alone with your trembling soul, it asks a question you cannot ignore. Who are you beneath all this? Not who you pretend to be. Not who they told you to become, but who you were before the world taught you how to hide. Beneath the persona, that polished mask you wear to survive lives, another presence. Just older, wilder, shadowed. It is not evil, though it has worn the face of everything you fear. It is the you that was exiled, repressed, buried alive in the unconscious. And until you meet it, until you face the shadow and call it by name, you will remain at war with yourself. The path to wholeness is not a straight line toward the light. It is a spiral that descends into darkness, into the forgotten, into everything you didn't want to feel. This is where the true journey begins, not in escape from suffering, but in surrender to it. Jung knew this. He walked this descent, not once but many times, through the dark forests of the psyche. Through the red book and its visions, he met gods and monsters, only to discover they were symbols of his own soul. You see, the unconscious is not a void. It is a hidden world, a vast inner continent filled with meaning, myth, and mystery. It is alive with symbols that speak, not in logic, but in metaphor. Dreams are its language, art, its altar. And your suffering, that ache you keep trying to numb, is its sacred message. You are not lost. You are being summoned into the underworld of your own psyche, where the dragon guards the treasure. This is the myth we've forgotten, that the way out is in, that the hero's journey is not a conquest of the world, but a descent into the self. And the first enemy on this path is the shadow. The shadow is everything you denied, everything you pushed down to be accepted, approved, loved. It is your rage, your jealousy, your shame, but also your passion, your creativity, your forgotten gifts. You were not meant to amputate these parts of yourself. You were meant to integrate them, to confront the shadow. Is to meet yourself in the dark and not flinch. It is to look into the mirror and see not a monster, but a wounded God. It is to understand that what you fear is not the shadow itself, but what it reveals, the truth that you are both light and dark, divine and flawed, sacred and human. The path of Jungian transformation does not ask you to destroy the ego, but to decentralize it, to dethrone it as the sole ruler of your consciousness. For the ego is necessary, but it is not the whole. It is the captain, not the ocean, the persona, not the soul. and it is terrified of the unknown within, so it distracts you with ambition, with addiction, with endless scrolling and constant striving. But all the while, the self waits like a temple, buried beneath the ruins. The self is not the ego improved. It is the union of opposites, the sacred center, the totality of who you are. To reach it, you must pass through inner fire. You must suffer consciously. You must die to who you were and be reborn into who you truly are. This is not a metaphor, this is alchemy, the oldest science of transformation, not of metals, but of soul. In alchemy, the first stage is nigredo, the blackening, the descent, confusion, despair, the breakdown of your old identity. This is when the outer world collapses, not to punish you, but to awaken you. When everything falls apart, you begin to see what you truly are made of. From the ashes of the ego, the self begins to rise, not as a concept, but as a presence. It is the you that has always been watching, the you that dreams, the you that knows. This self appears in symbols, the wise old man, the inner child, the sacred marriage of anima and animus, the masculine and feminine within. To ignore these symbols is to starve your soul, but to engage them to dialogue with your dreams, to welcome synchronicity, to pay attention to what pulls you inexplicably is to open a door to the inner world. And once opened, this door does not close. You begin to see that life is not happening to you, it is happening through you. That every encounter is a mirror, every challenge a message, every trigger a teacher. The world outside is a reflection of the world within, and when the unconscious is not made conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But fate is not the end. It is the invitation. It is the trail of breadcrumbs left by the self leading you back to wholeness. And to follow it, you must leave behind the familiar. You must abandon the comfort of knowing and step into the wilderness of being. This is where the anima and animus come forth. The inner feminine and inner masculine. Not in gender, but in archetype. She is the muse, the dream, the chaos that births creation. He is the focus, the discipline, the sword that cuts illusion. When they are split, you are divided. When they are united, you are whole. Most people project them outward. They fall in love with reflections of their own unlived soul. They chase validation connection, intoxicated by the archetype, blind to its purpose. Which is not romantic fulfillment, but inner union. The sacred marriage happens not in the wedding chapel, but in the psyche. To become whole is to reconcile the opposites, the king and the wild man, the witch and the priestess, the father and the rebel. And in doing so, the self is born not as a perfect being, but as a center that can hold the chaos, a mandala formed from fragments, a divine pattern hidden in the disorder. And so you walk the labyrinth not to escape it, but to find its center. You let the old gods die, the gods of image, of control, of egoic pride. You grieve the roles you played, the names you wore like armor, and as they fall away, you meet the orphan within. The child who never felt seen, the wanderer who never belonged. You do not silence them, you do not fix them. You listen, you sit in the ruins with them. You let them speak their truth, and in doing so, you reclaim your voice. This is individuation, not a path of becoming someone else, but becoming who you already are, beneath the noise. It is not about achievement, it is about authenticity. Not about being more, but being real. And it is not quick, it is not clean. It is the work of a lifetime. But what could be more sacred, what could be more necessary in a world addicted to illusion than the return to the soul, Jung said. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you now listening are being invited to that privilege. Not through force, but through inner fire, through surrender, through courage, through presence. So go inward, not to escape the world, but to find the only place it ever truly begins, within you. You are not just your ego. Awaken the self beneath the persona. There is a moment when the mirror no longer reflects truth, but habit. You wake up, look at your life, your roles, your name, your responsibilities, and something inside whispers, "This is not all of me." It is not rebellion, it is not dissatisfaction. It is the ancient murmur of the soul rising through the cracks of your identity, calling you back to the self you abandoned to survive. From childhood, you were taught how to fit in, how to succeed, how to be good, nice, strong, obedient. You were handed a script, a mask, a costume stitched from expectations, and you wore it well. So well, in fact, that you forgot. It was a mask. The face you show the world is not false. It is incomplete. This mask Jung called the persona. The social self, the carefully sculpted identity that protects you, connects you, allows you to function. But it is not the whole. It is not the source. It is the surface. Beneath the persona lies the ego, the central I that organizes your conscious thoughts, your stories, your sense of self. The ego is the narrator of your life, and it believes itself to be the king. But the ego is not sovereign. It is a fragment, a custodian of consciousness, yes, but not its creator. The ego is what you think you are. The self is what you are. And between the two lies a journey perilous, liberating, transformative. A journey into the unconscious, where your soul waits. The unconscious is not a place. It is a force, a living, breathing underworld of symbols, instincts, and forgotten truths. You do not control it. You do not even fully know it. But it knows you. It speaks through dreams, synchronicities, slips of the tongue, emotional triggers. It whispers in moods you can't explain and desires you fear to admit. It is not chaos. It is cosmos misunderstood. And the more you ignore it, the more it shapes your life. From the shadows, Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The ego resists this truth because to the ego, surrender feels like death. And in a way, it is not a physical death, but a death of certainty, of control, of identity. Yet this is the only way to awaken the self, not by force, but by descent into the unknown, into your inner wilderness, into everything the ego tried to deny. This descent is not a fall, it is a return to the forgotten parts of yourself, the wounded child, the abandoned artist, the silent mystic, the sacred fool. These are not flaws. They are fragments, soul shards. You buried them to be accepted, to be loved, to be safe. But the cost of that safety was wholeness. And now your wholeness is calling. To awaken the self, you must become the witness, the one who observes without judgment, who listens without interruption, who asks with quiet reverence, "What have I denied within me?" This is the beginning of integration. Not a moral process, but a psychological one. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be whole. And wholeness comes not by light alone, but by embracing the dark. The shadow is the gatekeeper of the self. It holds everything you refuse to see. Your jealousy, your rage, your lust, your fear. Yes, but also your power, your creativity, your sensuality, your spiritual fire. You cannot selectively numb. You cannot silence pain without also silencing passion. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your inheritance, and facing it is not destruction. It is initiation. When you meet the shadow, not with condemnation, but curiosity. You become dangerous in the most sacred way. Dangerous to illusions, dangerous to lies, because you are no longer manipulable. You are no longer ruled by the masks you wear or the fears you carry. You begin to speak from a deeper place, to move with a different rhythm. You become less reactive, more intuitive, less performative, more authentic. This is not easy. The ego will resist. It will scream, distract, seduce. It will call you back to comfort, to numbness, to the persona that once protected you. But the self does not shout, it waits, patient, silent, magnetic. When you turn toward it, the world begins to change. Not because the world changes, but because your perception deepens. You no longer see life as a battlefield. You see it as a mirror. Every relationship becomes a revelation, every challenge a teacher, every conflict a reflection. The people who trigger you the most become the ones who hold the keys to your shadow. The moments that hurt you the most become the very cracks where light enters, and slowly the boundaries between you and life dissolve. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me about me?" This is the path of individuation, not a straight road, but a spiral, a process of shedding, remembering, integrating. Not to become someone new, but to remember who you've always been, beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the fear. The self is not an idea. It is not a role. It is not an image. It is the living presence within you. Vast, mysterious, unshakable. It holds your wounds and your wisdom, your darkness and your light, your chaos and your clarity. It is not perfection, it is totality. And to awaken, it is to return home. Not to a place, but to your center. To the still point that no trauma can touch, to the sacred axis around which your life turns. You are not just your ego. You are the dreamer and the dream, the watcher and the watched, the flame and the ashes. And the more you remember this, the less you will seek validation from the outside. You will stop asking the world for permission to exist. You will stand perhaps trembling, perhaps uncertain, but you will stand in your truth. And from this truth, your life will begin again. Not as performance, but as presence. Not as survival, but as expression. Not as obedience, but as liberation. You are not just your ego. You never were. You never will be. And now, it is time to remember. Everything else was just the mask. The unconscious is calling. Will you answer the dark invitation? There is a sound that no ear can hear, and no instrument can measure a summons, rising not from the world, but from beneath it. It calls from the cavern beneath, thought from the ancient marrow of your being, not with words but with symbols, not with logic but with dreams. A door creaks open inside your night mind, and something crosses the threshold, a shadow, a whisper, a flicker of something too familiar to be foreign, and too foreign to be ignored. The unconscious is calling. It always has been. But now the call grows louder. You can drown it in noise. You can bury it beneath the rituals of the day, your schedules, your scrolling, your striving. You can even call it madness and lock it away behind reason, but it will not be silenced. It is older than your name, older than your story, older than every truth you think you know. The unconscious is not beneath you. It is around you, within you, behind your eyes, and beneath your skin. It is the unseen architecture of your being, the invisible compass that shapes your fate. It is the realm of archetypes, those primordial patterns that govern not just myth and story, but your desires, your fears, your relationships. The mother, the hero, the trickster, the shadow. These are not just characters in old tales. They are forces inside you, ancient energies dressed in modern clothes. And until you learn their language, you will live a life authored by ghosts. We were not meant to live only at the surface. Yet modern life seduces us with surfaces, images, impressions, profiles. We are taught to master the outer world, but never taught to navigate the inner one. We study history, science, success, but we are not taught how to grieve, how to feel, how to descend. And so the unconscious becomes a stranger, feared, dismissed, ignored, but it waits, patient as stone, quiet as depth. And sometimes when life unravels, when grief cracks open the facade, when love collapses or failure scorches the ego, the unconscious steps forward, not as punishment, but as initiation. Jung knew this. He walked into the dark willingly. He descended into visions, dreams, madness, not to escape reality, but to find it. Because reality is not just what we see, it is what we feel, what we remember in our bones, what we inherit in silence. The unconscious is not some primitive leftover. It is the soil of the soul. And if you want to grow, not just succeed, not just survive, but truly grow, you must return to the roots. The unconscious invites you into confrontation, not with the world, but with yourself. With the parts you hide, the stories you avoid, the wounds you refuse to name. It shows you not what you want to see, but what you need to see. Your dreams betray your secrets. Your emotions reveal your patterns. Your obsessions map your fears. And every time you react without knowing why, that is the unconscious knocking. But to answer that knock requires courage, not the courage to fight, but the courage to feel. To surrender the ego's illusion of control, to walk barefoot into the wilderness within. You may meet figures that terrify you. Monsters, tyrants, seducers, victims. But you must remember, these are not enemies. They are metaphors. They are masks worn by your own psyche. You are not being haunted. You are being shown. The unconscious does not punish. It reveals, it reflects. It corrects the imbalance between the life you perform and the life you actually live. If you deny your pain, it will show you through the pain of others. If you repress your rage, it will erupt as projection. If you silence your desire, it will twist itself into addiction or numbness. The unconscious is a mirror held in fire. It does not lie. It does not flatter, but it can set you free. Freedom, though, is not escape. It is integration. It is the slow, often painful alchemy of becoming whole. And wholeness does not come by light alone. It comes by union, the marriage of light and dark, of known and unknown, of ego and soul. This is the path of individuation, not a doctrine, not a dogma, but a movement toward authenticity. A descent before a rise, a crucifixion before resurrection. Your ego will resist this. It will cling to what is familiar. It will cry out for certainty, for clarity, for control. But the unconscious does not deal in certainty. It deals in symbols, in paradox. In dreams that shatter your logic, so something deeper can emerge. And in those dreams, you will find more than insight. You will find yourself, not the self you invented to be loved, but the self that has always been there, watching from the shadows, waiting to be remembered. This self is not a possession. It is not a goal. It is the center around which your entire being turns. It is the mandala in your chaos, the stillness in your storm, and it waits just beyond the mask. The unconscious is its temple. The shadow is its gate. And the invitation has been sent. Will you answer? Why? You still hurt the wound. You refuse to see. There is a pain that does not bleed, a wound that leaves no scar upon the skin, yet it haunts you with every quiet moment. You feel it, not in the body, but in the way your voice tightens when speaking the truth. in the way your heart withdraws from love. It cannot trust in the way you smile when you're supposed to. But something behind your eyes remains untouched. This is the wound you refuse to see, the one that lives not in the past, but in the present. A psychic fracture carried silently within. It was born the day you were taught that some parts of you were not welcome here, your anger, your grief, your yearning, your wildness. And so you buried them. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You stayed still when your soul longed to run. You played the role. You wore the mask, and it worked. At least for a while. But the wound never left. It only learned how to hide. And now it speaks to you in suffering. You still hurt because the exile continues, because the very parts of you that once protected your spirit are still locked away in the basement of your being, scratching at the floorboards, waiting to be remembered. Jung called this the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it is unseen. And what we do not see in ourselves, we project onto others. We label, we judge, we react, not because they are our enemy, but because they mirror what we have disowned within. You still hurt because your soul is split, because your psyche remembers what your ego has forgotten. There is something within you, still waiting to be integrated. The wound is not just pain, it is a map. It reveals where love stopped, where truth was punished, where you made the unconscious vow, I must not be this to survive. And so you became what was safe. You overachieved to outrun the silence. You became nice to avoid abandonment. You stayed small to be accepted, but in doing so, you became a stranger to your own essence. The wound you carry is not weakness. It is a sign that your soul is still alive, still speaking. And if you listen, truly listen, it will guide you back to what is real. But to heal this wound is not to erase it. It is to feel it fully, to allow its message to emerge without numbing, without fleeing, without turning it into performance. Healing is not fixing. Healing is remembering. It is the radical act of turning toward the very thing you were taught to run from. It is choosing to sit with your pain, not as victim or judge, but as witness. You are not here to conquer your darkness. You are here to understand it. Because inside that darkness are fragments of you, pieces you left behind in moments of fear, shame, rejection, and they do not need discipline. They need devotion. Jung once said, "We do not get wounded alone, and we do not heal alone." The wound often begins in relationship, and it must be held in relationship not always with others, but with the self, with the sacred inner witness that says, I see you. I will not abandon you again. When you become that presence for yourself, the wound softens. It stops screaming and starts speaking. It becomes not a curse, but a compass. And you begin to understand the pain was never the problem. The refusal to feel it was the journey through the wound, is a descent into the unconscious, into memory, into archetype. You will meet figures there. The abandoned child, the betrayed lover, the silent mourner. Do not turn away. These are not hallucinations. They are symbols of your inner life. They speak in image, in sensation, in dream. They carry wisdom that no book can teach. And if you approach them with reverence, they will open doors. Long thoughts sealed, you may weep, you may rage, you may tremble. Let it happen. This is the soul reclaiming its voice. You still hurt because the self is calling, because your wholeness is incompatible with suppression, because the unconscious will not let you live a lie indefinitely. And so the pain persists, not as punishment, but as passage. Every time it rises, it is saying, here, look here. This is where you abandoned yourself. This is the scene of the forgetting. Return to it, reclaim it, integrate what you left behind. The world has taught you to anesthetize, to be productive instead of present, to be strong instead of soft. But wholeness does not come from performance. It comes from presence. And presence means feeling. Feeling, fully feeling, without justification. Without needing it to make sense. Emotions are not obstacles to your healing. They are the doorways. Let them in. Let them move through, because only when they are seen can they shift. Only when they are embraced can they evolve. The wound you refuse to see is not just your pain. It is your power. The depth of your sorrow is the depth of your capacity for joy. The intensity of your rage mirrors the intensity of your passion. The ache of your loneliness reveals the immensity of your longing. And longing is sacred. It is the soul's compass. It leads you toward what is missing, toward what must be reclaimed. The wound shows you what matters. It strips away illusion. It tears down the false. And in the rubble you find something raw, something real, yourself, not the self you perform, not the self you prove, but the self that watches in silence, the self that remembers your dreams, the self that was never broken, only buried. That self is waiting, not above the pain, but beneath it. You must go down to rise. You must descend into your own underworld. Not to be consumed, but to be initiated. The fire does not destroy you. It burns away what you are not. And when the ashes settle, you will not be smaller, you will be whole. This is why you still hurt, because you are being invited inward. Because your healing does not begin when the pain stops. It begins when you finally have the courage to feel it. The power of the shadow. What you hide controls you. There is a darkness within you that you pretend not to see. It watches you in every mirror. It speaks in the words you almost say. It breathes in the silence between your thoughts. You dress it in silence. You hide it behind smiles. You exile it from the narrative you tell others, and even from the one you tell yourself. But it does not disappear. What you hide does not vanish. It waits. And the longer it waits, the more power it gains. This is the shadow, the side of you you disown. The forbidden, the repressed, the unspoken. Not because it is inherently evil, but because it is inconvenient. It threatens the image you built to survive. It threatens your idea of who you are. But here is the truth. If you fear to admit, what you hide controls you. It controls you in your triggers, in the anger that erupts without cause, in the jealousy that coils without warning, in the numbness that blankets your joy. You think you are making choices, but the shadow is choosing through you. As long as you remain unconscious of it, you are not living. You are being lived. Jung said it simply. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is not a metaphor. It is a diagnosis. The unacknowledged shadow becomes your prison warden, your saboteur, your invisible puppeteer. You see it in the people you judge, in the things that disgust you, in the figures you demonize. Projection is the game of the unconscious. What you cannot accept in yourself, you see magnified in others. You curse the arrogance of another while ignoring your own hunger for recognition. You hate their chaos while secretly longing to be wild. The shadow wears many masks, and each one is a mirror. The world is not just happening to you. It is revealing you. Every reaction is an invitation to look inward, not outward, to ask, what part of me am I refusing to meet? The shadow is not the enemy. It is the guardian of your wholeness. It holds your lost vitality, your buried gifts, your sacred rage, your unshed tears. tears. It holds your capacity for truth. But until you face it, you remain split. Half of you on the stage performing. The other half behind the curtain, pulling the strings. Integration does not mean indulging every impulse. It means acknowledging their existence. It means holding space for complexities. It means being honest enough to say, I am not just light, I am also shadow, and both are mine to carry. In myth, the hero never becomes whole by slaying the monster, but by discovering that the monster is himself. Think of every dragon guarding treasure, every descent into the underworld, every dark night of the soul. These are not just stories, they are maps of the inner world. And the treasure is always buried where you least want to look. The shadow is that place. It is the cave you fear to enter that holds the very thing you need. Not safety, not comfort, but authenticity, power, freedom. And this freedom comes at a price. The price of illusion, the death of the persona. You must be willing to lose your image, the one you curated so carefully, the one that earned approval, the one that felt safe. The persona is not bad. It is necessary, but it is not the self. It is the mask. And there comes a time when the mask becomes too tight, when the soul refuses to shrink, when the true self begins to rise, not with violence, but with gravity. It pulls you inward. It demands a reckoning. The reckoning begins when you stop running, when you turn around and face the parts of you that scare you. The rage, the shame, the need, the hunger. You look them in the eye. You say, I see you. I know where you come from. You are not my master, but you are mine, and slowly you begin to reclaim what was lost. This is not an instant transformation. It is a sacred unfolding. It is shadow work at the alchemical process of turning the unconscious into gold. Not the gold of achievement, but the gold of awareness. Awareness changes everything. When you become aware of your shadow, you're no longer a puppet. You're no longer ruled by compulsions you don't understand. You begin to choose. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to speak from depth instead of performance. You become dangerous, not in a destructive way, but in a sacred way. Because you can no longer be manipulated by fear. You can no longer be controlled by shame. You have faced your demons and found yourself. And the self is not a fantasy. It is not an ideal. It is the center that holds the opposites. The union of conscious and unconscious. The reconciliation of light and dark. The self is not perfection. It is integration, and it can only be reached by walking through shadow, not around it. Jung wrote that the shadow is 90% pure gold. But you must mine it. You must dig through the dirt. You must break the silence. You must choose to know yourself, all of yourself, even the parts that never got loved, never got seen, never got spoken. You are not broken. You are divided. And the shadow is the bridge. It is the hidden path back to wholeness. It is the sacred fire that burns away the false and leaves only the true. Do not fear its power. Fear what happens when you ignore it, because the shadow will not vanish. It will wait, it will grow, and one day it will erupt in your relationships, in your addictions, in your isolation. Or it can be embraced, befriended, integrated, transformed. The choice is yours. The shadow has always been there, waiting to be seen. The question is, will you look? Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Carl Jung's truth. There comes a point in every life when the outer world can no longer explain the inner ache. You have the job, the relationship, the answers, and still something stings in the quiet. You scroll past it. you laugh over it. You dress it in rationalizations, but it waits, not because it wants to destroy you, but because it wants to awaken you. That ache, the silent sorrow that lingers, even when all is well, is not a weakness. It is the soul's way of telling you something is missing. Not outside, but within. And so long as you keep looking outward for peace, the world will keep wounding you. Not because it is cruel, but because it is your mirror. What hurts you is not the world, but what the world touches inside you. Carl Jung did not promise safety. He did not teach avoidance. He taught us the most dangerous truth of all, that you are not what happens to you. You are what you do with what happens to you. And to truly heal you, must first stop running. You must stop numbing, pleasing, defending, pretending. You must stand still. Long enough to feel the thing you've buried your entire life. Only then can you become someone who is no longer breakable. Not because you have hardened, but because you have integrated. Nothing and nobody can truly hurt you once you know where your wounds live, and have sat with them long enough to understand them. You have been taught to armor yourself, to build walls, to grow thicker skin, to pretend it doesn't matter. But this is not invincibility. This is imprisonment. The more you try not to care, the more you suffer in silence. The more you try to control how others treat you, the more they control you, because control is not the answer. Consciousness is. Till you know you're unconscious. You are a puppet of your triggers, your trauma, your repressed desires. But the moment you stop resisting what is inside, everything changes. What you accept transforms. What you bring into the light loses its grip on you. The people who hurt you do not hold power. They activate what is already there. They press the bruise, they find the scar. But they are not the source. The wound was already waiting, so do not fear their rejection. Do not obsess over their judgment. Look instead at the part of you that believes you need their love to be worthy. That's where the work is. Not out there, but here in the silent roots of your being. The deeper you go, the less power the world has over you, because your self-worth stops being a transaction. It becomes a truth. You cannot fake this awakening. You cannot chant your way into it or read enough books to bypass it. This is not surface work. This is descent into the cave of your shadow, into the silence of your unmet grief, into the memory you swore you'd never revisit. But when you do, when you finally stop protecting yourself from yourself, you begin to change. Not slowly, not mildly, but fundamentally. You realize that pain does not own you, that fear does not direct you, that your value has never depended on the approval of the world. And in that moment, that breathtaking, ego-shattering moment, you become untouchable, not unreachable, not cold, but free. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Not becoming better, but becoming whole. Not ascending into some perfect light, but descending into the roots of your being and finding the divine, even in your darkness. The power is not in overcoming what hurt you. The power is in no longer identifying with the one who was hurt. You carry the pain, but you are not the pain. You remember the wound, but you are not the wound. You observe the emotion, but you are not its prisoner. You awaken the self at the center, beyond identity, beyond drama, beyond ego. And once the self rises, the game changes. You will still feel, you will still cry, you will still falter, but you will not collapse, you will not shatter. Because your center is rooted now, not in appearances, but in awareness. The world can mock you, betray you, misunderstand you. And you will still stand not in defiance, but in truth. You will still love. Not because you need to be loved back, but because love is who you are. You will still walk through the fire, but you will know it cannot burn the parts of you that are real. What burns is illusion. What falls away is the mask. And what remains is you, raw, whole, and radiant. Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Not because the world becomes kind, but because you have stopped handing it the keys to your worth. Not because pain disappears, but because you have stopped resisting it. You have let it teach you, shape you, open you. You are no longer avoiding life. You are living it fully consciously, courageously, and that Jung would say is the greatest transformation of all. Until you know your wounds, you'll keep bleeding on repeat. There is a pattern in your life that you can't seem to break. It shows up in different people, in different places, wearing different faces, but the ache it brings is always the same. The disappointment, the rejection, the unspoken shame. It follows you like a shadow cast not by light, but by memory. And no matter how many times you escape, reinvent, or begin again, the same story finds you, not because the world conspires against you, but because your own unconscious is trying to be heard. It bleeds through your choices. It echoes in your silences. It lives in the spaces you avoid. And until you know your wounds, you'll keep bleeding on repeat. We are not hurt only by what happens to us. We are hurt by what we are forced to bury to survive it. Childhood wasn't just a time of innocence. It was a time of adaptation. You learned what parts of you were safe to show, and what parts needed to be hidden, to be loved, accepted, or even just tolerated. You silenced your anger to keep the peace. You dulled your joy to not outshine. You ignored your intuition to avoid punishment. And what you buried didn't disappear. It simply went underground, into the unconscious, into the shadow. Jung taught us that the psyche is not a clean slate, but a living system, a battlefield between the known and the unknown. What is unconscious does not die. It waits. And when it is not brought to consciousness, it plays itself out in the form of fate. You repeat the same arguments, attract the same betrayals, fall into the same loneliness, because the wound wants to be seen. The wound is not trying to punish you. It is trying to free you. But it can only do so through recognition, through awareness, through a courageous turning inward. The wound is a symbol. It holds more than pain. It holds truth. It holds history. It holds the parts of your soul that were never given a voice. Until you speak to it, it will scream. In the only way it knows how. Through self-sabotage, through projection, through emotional reactivity. Not because you are broken, but because something sacred is still trapped beneath your survival strategies, and no amount of success, affirmation, or external change can heal what has not yet been named. This is where the work begins, not in fixing yourself, but in finding the lost pieces, in descending into the dark and sitting beside the versions of you who were never allowed to be. The angry one, the sad one, the needy one, the wild one. These are not enemies to be purged. They are soul fragments to be retrieved. Each one holds an aspect of your power. Each one is a guardian of your authenticity. And each one will keep wounding you until you finally turn and say, I see you, I hear you, I am not ashamed of you anymore. This is not a metaphorical journey, it is a psychological initiation. You will grieve the life you built on avoidance. You will rage at the silence that protected your pain. You will feel the tremble of your nervous system as it lets go of decades of pretending. But through that fire, something extraordinary happens. You begin to become real. Not the performance, not the persona, but the self, the wholeness that was waiting beneath the mask. Individuation, as Jung called it, is not the path of becoming perfect. It is the path of becoming whole, of bringing all the disowned parts of you back into communion. It is alchemy, inner transformation. turning wounds into wisdom, suffering into meaning. And it cannot be faked. It requires presence, honesty, surrender. It requires you to stop negotiating with your pain and to start listening to it. Because pain is not just a message, it is a messenger. And until you welcome it, it will keep knocking. Louder, harder, sharper. There are no shortcuts here, no bypasses, no affirmations that will make it disappear. You must go into the memory, into the feeling, into the symbols that appear in your dreams, and the stories you cannot stop telling. You must become an archaeologist of your own soul, excavating what has been buried, not to analyze it, but to integrate it. Because what you meet with compassion loses its power to control you, and what you hold with consciousness becomes light. You are not cursed. You are called to face the patterns, not as failures, but as invitations. Each one points you toward the place you abandoned yourself. Each repetition reveals the part of you still waiting to be chosen. Until you know your wounds, they will choose for you. But when you know them, truly know them, they become sacred. They become portals. They become the raw material of your awakening. So feel the pain. Name the pattern. Follow it into the dark. There you will find the truth you've been avoiding and the power you've been seeking. There you will find not just healing, but yourself. The truth about emotional strength. It's not what you think. You were taught that strength is silence, that to be unshaken means to be unmoved. You were told that to be emotionally strong is to stay composed, to not cry, to not show the tremble in your voice, the storm behind your eyes. But what if that's not strength at all? What if that is suppression dressed as virtue? What if the image of emotional invincibility is a cage, one that keeps you locked away from your own soul? There is a different kind of strength, older, deeper, unseen. It does not roar, but it endures. It does not dominate, but it allows. It does not deny the pain, it becomes intimate with it. This strength is not found in armor, but in exposure, in the willingness to be touched by life without collapsing. And that Jung understood is where the self is forged, not in resistance, but in conscious surrender. Emotional strength, real strength, is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to be with your feelings without being ruled by them. It is the power to stay conscious in the midst of the flood, not to control the water, but to remain the container that holds it. Strength is presence, the kind of presence that can sit with grief without needing to fix it, that can hold anger without letting it consume, that can face fear without abandoning the heart. This is the strength of integration, not avoidance. And it does not come from the ego. It comes from the self, the inner center that survives the shattering, because it was never built on illusion to begin with. We often mistake defense mechanisms for resilience. The smile that masks the ache, the productivity that conceals the emptiness, the perfectionism that hides the shame. But none of this is strength. These are strategies of the persona, the face we show to the world, so that we are not exposed, but the persona is fragile. It can be cracked by a word, a look, a silence. Real strength begins when the persona breaks, and something deeper emerges, something that does not need to prove itself to be valid, something that knows its worth even when it trembles. Jung's path was never about becoming superhuman. It was about becoming fully human. And that means reclaiming all that you've disowned. It means standing in the center of your complexity and saying, I am this too. I am the sorrow and the joy. I am the rage and the peace. I am the wound and the healer. And I do not need to be cured. I need to be witnessed. Emotional strength is not an achievement. It is a relationship with your own soul that deepens each time you choose presence over performance. Each time you let yourself feel instead of flee. Each time you open instead of shut down. There is a reason ancient myths speak of the underworld. Because to know yourself, you must descend. You must walk into the very thing you've been running from: your sadness, your shame, your unmet needs. Not to drown in them, but to find what lives beneath. To discover the treasure that was hidden under all the layers of defense. This is the journey of the wounded healer, not the one who has never been broken, but the one who has turned their own fracture into a doorway. Who has learned that strength is not about never falling, but about falling with awareness and rising with truth. There is a fire within you that cannot be extinguished, not because it never flickers, but because it knows how to burn even in darkness. That fire is yourself, not your identity, not your role, but the unchanging presence beneath it all. When you root yourself there, the world loses its power to define you. You stop chasing validation. You stop performing for love. You begin to live not as an image, but as a presence. And from that presence, a new kind of strength is born. The kind that does not shout. The kind that does not shatter. The kind that knows I am whole even here, even now. Emotional strength is not found in the refusal to bend. It is found in the capacity to be moved without breaking apart. It is found in the courage to feel fully, fiercely, without numbing or judging. It is found in the choice to meet each wave of emotion, not with resistance, but with reverence. You are not weak because you feel deeply. You are alive. You are not broken because you cry. You are opening. You are not failing because you falter. You are transforming. And every time you choose to stay with yourself, in the ache, in the longing, in the chaos, you are building something indestructible. This is the truth about emotional strength. It is not what you've been told. It is not about control. It is not about pretending. It is not about being untouched. It is about being touched and still choosing to love, to trust, to stay. You become strong the moment you stop running from yourself. You become strong the moment you make the unconscious conscious and say, I will no longer abandon what hurts. I will listen. I will feel. I will carry it, not as a burden, but as a birthright, because everything you've endured has carved you into a vessel of truth. And now it is time to hold it all with strength, with softness, with soul. How to stop being controlled by people, pain, and the past. You think you are free because you can speak your mind, choose your path, change your job, end a relationship. But what if your choices are not truly yours? What if they are echoes, unconscious reactions to what hurt you long ago? What if the voice you call your own is still negotiating with the wounds of the past, still bargaining for safety, still asking for love in ways that only recreate the original pain? You are not free until you are no longer controlled by the invisible, until you are no longer answering to ghosts. And the ghosts wear many masks: the memory of the parent who didn't see you, the partner who abandoned you, the society that taught you who you had to be accepted. They linger not in the world, but in the psyche, in the way you flinch before you speak, in the way you shrink before you shine, in the way you seek approval like a lifeline. The past is not behind you. It is within you, and it rules you until you turn and face it. To stop being controlled is not to erase the past. It is to reclaim your presence within it. It is to enter the inner landscape where the original story was written and to rewrite it. Not with denial, but with truth. Carl Jung taught that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, But by making the darkness conscious, you must walk into your own night, into the memory you silence, into the betrayal you minimize, into the pain you intellectualize but have never truly felt, not to relive it, but to retrieve the part of you that got left behind. The part that decided in one soul-shaping moment, I am not safe, I am not enough, I must not trust, I must not speak. That belief frozen in time is what governs you still. It controls your decisions. It sabotages your peace. And until it is brought to the surface, it will define your life. Freedom begins in awareness. It begins when you stop asking others to stop hurting you and start asking, what in me is still open to this wound? Why does this voice pierce so deeply? Why does this rejection feel like death? You are not weak. You are unfinished. There is a part of you still waiting to be completed, still waiting to be seen. Not by others, but by you. And when you see it, when you sit with it, without judgment, when you listen, without flinching, the power begins to return. Not the power to dominate, but the power to choose, to respond rather than react, to discern rather than defend, to walk away, not out of fear, but out of clarity. People do not control you. They reveal you. They reflect what is unhealed, unloved, unintegrated. The one who disrespects you reveals where you have not yet claimed your worth. The one who deceives you reflects where you still betray yourself. The one who abandons you shows you the part of you that still feels disposable. This is not blame. This is alchemy. The external triggers the internal. And every pain is a portal, not to fix the other, but to find yourself. You have given your power to the past. Not because you are weak, but because no one taught you how to hold it. Because the world said, don't cry, and you listened. It said, be strong, and you silenced your need. It said, move on, and you left parts of yourself behind. But strength is not suppression. Healing is not forgetting. Maturity is not performance. Real power begins the moment you stop pretending. The moment you say, I am not okay. And that's where I begin. I am not whole, and that's why I'm worthy. I am in pain, and that pain is sacred. You stop being controlled the moment you stop resisting the truth. The truth of what you feel, the truth of who you are, the truth of what happened and how deeply it shaped you. You cannot transcend what you have not yet honored. You cannot evolve past what you have not yet embraced. Jung called this integration, the process of becoming whole. It is not a destination. It is a sacred unraveling, a shedding of masks, of roles, of inherited ideas. Until what remains is not who you were told to be, but who you are. And who you are is not defined by pain, but forged in it. You are the one who endured, who felt deeply, who lost and still chose to open, who broke and still chose to rebuild. But this time not around the wounds, but around the self, that the self does not need the world to change. It does not need others to be different. It does not need the past to disappear, because it is no longer seeking to be completed from the outside. It knows that wholeness is internal. And from that knowing you become untouchable. Not invulnerable, but sovereign. Not indifferent, but awake. You will still feel. You will still love. But you will no longer bleed for those who cannot see you. You will no longer chase what depletes you. You will no longer twist yourself into shapes to be chosen, because you have already chosen yourself. The past will still exist, but it will not command you. Pain will still visit, but it will not define you. People will still challenge you, but they will not control you, because you now know who holds the reins, and it is no longer your wounds, it is your awareness. This is how you stop being controlled, not by force, but by inner revolution, by making the unconscious conscious, by letting go of who you had to be, and returning with reverence to who you are. What you resist persists. The hidden law of inner suffering. You think you're running from pain, but you're running in circles, a spiral carved by every refusal, every distraction, every unspoken fear. You call it growth, you call it strength, but it's resistance, plain and silent. You push it down, you smile over it. You bury it in ambition or numb it in noise. But the pain doesn't leave. It lingers, it disguises itself as coincidence, emerges as anxiety, returns as self-sabotage. It comes back in your relationships, your decisions, your quiet moments, because what you resist does not vanish. What you resist persists. This is not superstition. This is the hidden law of inner suffering. Carl Jung understood it well, that the more you try to avoid your darkness, the more power it has over you. And so your life becomes not an expression of freedom, but a loop unconsciously repeating what you will not face. Pain is not the enemy. It is the messenger. It arrives carrying the truths you refuse to acknowledge, bearing the faces you buried, speaking in the language of dreams and symptoms. It does not come to break you. It comes to break the illusion. The illusion that you are in control, that you can outrun the past, that if you just think positively enough, feel nothing, or heal quickly, you can stay clean. But the soul is not clean. The soul is wild, ancient whole. It wants every part of you, not just the light. And if you won't bring the darkness into your awareness, it will bring itself into your life until you listen. You resist because you were taught that pain is weakness, that tears are shameful, that fear must be overcome, not understood. And so you built walls armor mechanisms to protect yourself. But they did not protect you. They imprisoned you. They kept out not just the pain, but the possibility of transformation. Because every emotion you resist becomes a shadow, and every shadow you ignore becomes a mask. You smile, but your eyes betray you. You succeed, but your soul stays empty. You connect, but you don't feel safe. This is the cost of resistance. It fragments you. You are not whole because you have made an enemy of your own inner world. You war with sadness, argue with rage, silence the voice that trembles, but none of these are here to destroy you. They are here to show you where you lost yourself, where you were silenced, where you began to perform. They are not your punishment. They are your path back to integration. When Jung spoke of making the unconscious conscious, he did not mean rationalizing it. He meant feeling it, facing it, honoring it, letting it speak in its own language. Symbols, dreams, synchronicities, somatic whispers, he meant giving space to what you've exiled. Because only what is held can be healed. Now the mind resists what the soul already knows. That suffering cannot be solved from the outside. That no amount of validation, control, or escape will quiet the ache that comes from being split inside. You are not broken, you are divided, and the split persists because you keep refusing to enter the places where it began. The body remembers the psyche records, and the unconscious will not rest until it is known. It is not a vault to be locked, but a garden to be cultivated, and every weed, every tangle, every root of pain must be approached with reverence, not as a problem, but as a portal. What you resist persists because it is you, a forgotten you, a younger you, a voice that once asked for help and was met with silence. It returns because you are the only one who can answer, not by fixing it, but by listening, not by conquering it, but by holding it. This is how the spell is broken. Not with force, but with presence, with the willingness to stop running, to sit in the heat of your discomfort and ask, what am I really afraid of feeling? What truth have I been protecting myself from? Who would I be if I no longer needed to pretend? The persona, the mask you wear, cannot answer these questions. It is designed to avoid them. But the self, the core of who you are, is born in that very fire. It emerges not when the suffering ends, but when you stop resisting it. When you say, this too is me. This grief, this rage, this longing, it belongs. And in that moment, you begin to integrate. You begin to become real, not polished, not perfect, but whole. Wholeness does not mean happiness without end. It means authenticity. It means coherence between your outer life and your inner truth. It means no longer being enslaved by what you pretend not to feel. You cannot awaken by bypassing the darkness. You awaken by entering it consciously. You find the treasure not by avoiding the dragon, but by walking into its cave and discovering that it was guarding something sacred, your own unlived life. So when the ache returns, do not resist it, invite it. Ask what it wants you to remember. Ask what it needs you to feel. Ask what part of you it is trying to restore. Because what you resist persists, but what you accept transforms.